Shannon Watts is no stranger to life's struggle, especially after she just found out that she has diabetes. She's at her lowest point when she connects with a guy on Facebook, Chris. At first, he seems like just another online guy, handsome and definitely out of her league. But something about him just clicks. Their connection deepens, and before she knows it, they're meeting in person. That spark quickly turned into love. By November 3rd of 2012, they're married in Mecklenburg County. And what's next for a newly married couple? They buy a stunning five-bedroom home on Saratoga Trail in Frederick, Colorado. A year later, on December 17th, 2013, they welcome their first daughter, Bella. 2 years later, Celeste comes along, born on July 17th, 2015. Everything seems perfect. Chris is the doting father, and Shannon feels like she's living her dream. They're the real ideal all American suburban family. And just when they thought life couldn't get any better, Shannon gets pregnant with a baby boy. They are planning to name him Nico. Everything feels perfect, almost too perfect. And this is the story of the Watts. Hi guys, welcome to True Crime Comment Quest, where we delve into the mysteries of true crime cases that you've requested, not just on my channel, but other true crime YouTubers' comments as well, which may or may not have been overlooked. The reason why I'm doing Chris Watts today is because of the follow-up of the fact that I did Ramon Salcido, and you guys could watch my last video. I said that I feel like Chris Watts got inspo basically from Ramon Salcido, so I just felt like, why wouldn't I do a Chris Watts case right after to make everything just flow? So now, let's dive right in. Christopher Watts, born on the 16th of May 1985 from Spring Lake, is your classic quiet, handsome guy. Well, at least in Colorado's standards. He meets his beautiful wife, Shannon Watts, on Facebook, and together they create a dream life for each other. Sure, they went bankrupt in 2015, but Chris immediately landed a job in Anadarko Petroleum, and Shannon worked from home as a marketer for a company called Level. To Shannon, they had it all. His wife, Shannon, absolutely adored him and her two girls and believed nothing could tear her perfect world apart. Well, guess what? Something could, and that something was infidelity. As their marriage progresses, Shannon starts noticing Chris acting distant and giving her very little to no attention. Let's be real, nothing screams cheating to a woman more than suddenly not getting attention. To Shannon, this is her picture perfect life. She couldn't watch it fall away right before her eyes, so she suggests counseling. But Chris, he resists. For reasons only he knows. Turns out there's another woman in the picture. She was a co-worker at Chris's workplace, and her name is Nicole. Shannon finds out and she's not happy. Fast forward to August 13, 2018, Shannon, now 15 weeks pregnant with their baby boy Nico, returned home from a business trip at 1:48 a.m. with her friend Nicole. That night, Shannon finally confronts Chris about the affair. Chris coldly tells her he doesn't love her anymore, then gets on top of her. She begs him to get off, saying he's hurting the baby, but he literally doesn't listen. So when he gets off for a while, she threatens that he'll never see their girls again, and that's when Chris snaps. He strangles her until she stops moving, but it doesn't end there. Their 4-year-old daughter, Bella, comes into the room clutching her pink blanket. She sees her mom lying face down on the bed, unmoving, and asks, "What's wrong with mommy?" Chris tells her mommy's fine. He carries Shannon's body to his truck, with Bella following close behind. Next, he grabs Celeste and Bella, placing them both in the trunk too. The girls sit in their seats while Shannon lies lifeless on the floor. Imagine what a horrible scene this must have been for these girls. But in their heads, I'm sure they just thought that mommy was sick and they were going to get quickly to the hospital. They were literally in the same car with their mom's body, dead, and their dad driving like nothing literally happened. Disturbed that their mom was on the floor, of the truck and not her usual passenger seat. They ask their dad again if mommy is okay, and Chris assures them once again that mommy is just fine. Chris didn't want them staring at Shannon's body, so he wrapped her up with two trash bags, one over her head and the other over her feet. He drives to the oil well, Servi 319, where he works as a mechanic. First, he takes out little Celeste, places his hand over her mouth and nose, and smothers her. Trust me, I too couldn't believe it. He then stuffs her body into an oil tank. Mind you, Celeste's body was bigger than the space in the tank, so he had to force and break her little body just to make her fit. Then, he moves on to Bella, does the same, and places her in a separate tank. Finally, he covers Shannon's body with a bedsheet and buries her in a shallow grave. The next day, alarm starts going off. Shannon had a prenatal appointment with her OB/GYN, and she's not the type to just miss it. She was 15 weeks pregnant after all. Plus, Shannon is all over social media. She posts every day. So when she goes silent, people start to worry. And let's not forget her friend Nicole, who had dropped her off that night. She had been texting Shannon all morning and not getting any replies. This really freaks Nicole out. By 12:10 p.m., Nicole goes to the White House to check in on Shannon, but the door is locked from the inside. Now, Nicole is extra worried because Shannon has low blood sugar, so if she's inside and something happened to her, it could be serious. She calls Chris to ask where Shannon is, and he immediately cooks up a response. Oh, she had a play date with the girls today. But Nicole isn't buying it. She tells Chris she's calling the police, but Chris tries to stall her, saying he's on his way home. Nicole doesn't heed to his pleas. She is concerned of her friend because in her head, she thinks her friend is on low blood sugar or low iron and probably fainted in the house or something. So by 1:37 p.m., an officer from the Frederick Police Department arrives. Nicole tells him she peeked into the garage and saw Shannon's car was still in there, along with the shoes that she wears every day by the front door. They knock on the neighbor's door, asking if they've seen Shannon. Of course, they haven't because, well, Shannon is dead. Chris eventually shows up and opens the door. Inside, Nicole finds Shannon's purse with her medication inside and her phone just sitting on the table. This is weird because Shannon is glued to that phone. It's like her lifeline. Chris even said to himself, and now she's supposed to be on a play date without it? It doesn't add up. Chris, however, is acting calm, cool, and collected. He's being so cooperative, you'd never guess he just killed his entire family. He sticks to his story about Shannon taking the girls to a friend's house, but nothing about this is making sense. Why would she leave behind her phone, her meds, and her shoes also behind? Almost looks like she wants nobody to find her. This is when the red flags should have been raised. Chris tells the police he doesn't know who this friend Shannon went to see. He says that he texted and called her, but she hasn't picked up. He even claims that none of her other friends have heard from her either. Now, if Chris really cared, wouldn't this be the point where he starts panicking and filing a missing persons report? It's almost like he's relieved no one can find her. This should have set off alarm bells in the police's head, like for the police, honestly. Then the police ask the $1 million question. Did you two have any issues? Because let's be real, no one's buying the idea that Shannon just up and left everything behind. She loved her family too much for that, and everybody that knew Shannon literally knew that. Chris says they were going through a separation and planning to sell the house. The speed with which he comes up with these lies is honestly baffling. While the police are still at the Watts house, they ask a neighbor if they could take a look at his security footage to see if it caught Shannon leaving or anyone else entering inside the house. At 5:35 a.m., the neighbor, Shannon, has footage showing Chris parking in the garage. He parks his truck in such a way that the surveillance camera can't capture what he's loading into the car. He claims it's just his work tools, but we know better. As they watch the footage, Nathan notices that Chris is barely paying attention to the screen. Instead, he's playing with his phone and constantly trying to convince everyone that nothing suspicious happened. Like he's trying to justify their appearance. For a guy whose wife and kids are missing, Chris doesn't seem all that interested. Nathan even pulls the police aside at one point to tell them that Chris's behavior isn't right. And this is when it also kind of clocked for the police because they were like, he actually is acting weird. At this point, Shannon and the girls have been missing for 24 hours, and the police decide to shift from a simple welfare check to a full blown criminal investigation. They come back to the house for a thorough search but find no clear evidence. Though they do notice the top sheet from the bed is missing, which seems odd given how organized the house is. The police call in the FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation for help. And when Chris is interviewed on the news, the concern he claims to have seems barely there. People can see how he's so calm and calculated and almost too calm. It's like he can't even pretend to care. Now, we're going to talk about the interrogation. After watching his interview, Agent Tammy Lee, the major investigator of the Watts case, suggested that Chris be brought in for questioning to get his story right. When he was being questioned, he said that initially he thought she actually went to stay with a friend, but now, with the onslaught of police cars, the news, and the numerous K9 units, he thinks something might have happened to Shannon and his kids and that someone might have taken them. They have Chris write out a statement which they used to question him in great detail. Well, Chris assures them that he knows nothing about their whereabouts. They were in the house and then he left to work, which was his story that he kept on repeating thousands and thousands of times. The FBI already knows Chris cheated on his wife, Shannon, but when asked about it, Chris, in classic fashion, lies to law enforcement. The investigators suspect his infidelity might have played a role in Shannon's disappearance, so they decide to run a polygraph test. The questions that they asked Chris in the polygraph test was, did you physically cause Shannon's disappearance? No. Are you lying about the last time you saw Shannon? No. Do you know where Shannon is now? No. At this point, the police are baffled. They already know about his affair and they ask if Shannon ever suspected anyone else. Chris casually shrugs it off, saying, you know, women, they always think there's someone else. Sure, Chris, because that's totally normal when your wife and daughter have been missing over 48 hours. For over 48 hours, your children and your kids, your children and your wife has been missing, and like, you just say that about your wife. Okay, that's cool. Then the polygraph results come in. Now, to put this in perspective, a truthful person scores around +2, and someone being deceptive scores -4. Chris? He scores a solid -18. Yep, he failed every single question. The polygraph results immediately make him their prime suspect. The investigation ramps up. They find a white sheet at Survey 319, the site where Chris worked. And since they know the bed at home was stripped, the first thing they do is check if the sheet matches. Then they find an area of disturbed death nearby. What comes to mind? A shallow grave, of course. When the lead investigator walks back into the room, her demeanor has completely changed. She's no longer playing nice. She's here for the truth. Chris, ever the denier, insists he didn't lie on the polygraph. Tammy, the examiner, bluntly replies, that's not even an option, you didn't pass. Realizing that he's concerned, Chris scrambles for an excuse. He's just mumbling under his voice. And what does he go with? The most innocuous thing he can think of. I cheated on her, he says, to which they reply with deadpan. We already knew that. When the investigators realize Chris isn't budging, they switch tactics. Victim blaming. Agent Koda, the co-interrogator, throws out lines like, I believe Shannon was controlling. She doesn't listen. She thinks she can do whatever she wants. Tammy, trying to sound sympathetic, also asks, did Shannon do something to the girls? Did you feel like you had to do something to her? It's all just a psychological trick to get Chris talking. And it's worked. He's exhausted, so he asks, "Can I talk to my dad?" Enter Ronnie Watts, Chris's father, who just wants to comfort his son while gently asking, "Is there anything I should know?" Then Chris drops a bombshell. "I don't want to protect her. She hurt them and I freaked out and I hurt her." He claims he walked into Bella and Celeste's room, saw them blue and panicked, saying Shannon choked them. So he did the same thing to her. Yep, Chris takes the bait and dives straight into the lie the police fed him. But now that the investigators know the truth, they're not going to find Shannon or the girls alive. Chris has just confessed that they are dead. He even tries to shift the blame to Shannon, saying he saw it all on the monitor. Bella's blanket pulled off, her lifeless body lying there blue. He's literally pointing his finger at someone who cannot defend herself. Classic coward move. Tammy keeps up her calm act, but inside she's outraged. As she later admits in an interview, "I didn't want to show him my anger because I needed Chris to keep talking. Hard to imagine holding back when faced with such a story." She then asks him the $1 million question: "Where are their bodies?" Chris replies with a location: Servi 319, the very site investigators had already flagged. Tammy asks if he could take them there, but Chris says no, probably knowing just how horrific the scene looks and dreading how they'd see him for the monster that he really is. They hand him a tab with the photograph of the landscape of Servi 319, asking him to mark where Shannon and the girls are. Chris calmly marks a shallow grave for Shannon and points to the oil tanks for the girls. Agent Koda is puzzled. "Are they inside?" Chris replies, "Yes." Koda then asks, "What is inside the tanks?" And Chris explains the tanks hold a mixture of oil and water. Koda couldn't believe his ears. In a later interview, Tammy says, "I just couldn't believe a father could do something so horrible to his children and wife." Well, Tammy, you better start believing it because you're not dealing with a father anymore, just a shell of a human being. And by the way, those sheets they found near the site, yeah, Shannon was wrapped in them. But even after all this, Tammy knows it wasn't Shannon who killed those girls. Shannon, pregnant and exhausted after a business trip, isn't waking up after 2 or 3 hours of sleep to go murder her daughters. Chris can try to spin it all he wants, but the truth is painfully clear. So, get this. Tammy's sitting there asking Chris, "So you're good with everyone thinking Shannon killed your daughter?" Like expecting him to suddenly grow a conscience or something. By Wednesday 9 p.m., Shannon, Bella, and Celeste had been missing for 56 hours. And at this point, it's obvious Chris is their guy. They cuff him, snap photos of him, and by 11 p.m., he's on his way to the county jail. Meanwhile, the authorities start excavating Shannon's grave. David Maloney, the CBI lab manager, leads the dig and he's seen it all. But even he's shocked. Shannon wasn't laid down like most bodies. Nope. She was curled up, practically tossed in like garbage, and hastily covered in death. Fast forward to the morning of the 16th. Now it's time to retrieve the girls from the oil tanks. Everyone shows up with this sense of dread, wondering how on earth two small kids to fit into those tiny tank openings. At first, they couldn't even see anything from the top hatch, so for a moment they thought Chris might still be lying. Then they spot a tuft of blonde hair inside. They find Celeste first, still in her nightgown in the first tank. Then they get to Bella in the second tank. Now the question becomes, how did they die? Were the injuries consistent with Chris's story? The pathologists concluded that Shannon died from manual strangulation. But the most heartbreaking part, Bella's injuries showed she fought back. She struggled as someone suffocated her, cutting off her hair. Chris had tried to sell the story that he caught Shannon strangling Celeste, but the autopsy told a different story. Celeste had died from smothering, not strangulation. In the end, the evidence proved Chris's story was a complete lie. So, Chris gets arrested on the 15th of August in 2018. The charges? 5 counts of first-degree murder, unlawful termination of pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. But before the trial even happens on November 6th, 2018, he pleads guilty as part of a deal to avoid the death penalty. The deal is simple. If Chris admits to everything, he won't face execution. But there's a catch. The authorities will only accept it if Shannon's family is okay with it. Sandy, Shannon's mom, steps up and says, he made the choice to take those lives. I don't want to be the one to decide to take his. So, on the 19th of November 2018, Chris is sentenced to 5 life sentences, 3 consecutive and 2 concurrent without parole. Oh, and let's not forget the extra 48 years for the unlawful termination of pregnancy and another 36 for tampering with the bodies. By December 3rd, 2018, they've moved him from Colorado to a correctional facility in Wisconsin, supposedly for security reasons. But even with Chris locked away, people still aren't satisfied. Everyone still wants to know why he did it. So investigators head to Wisconsin to get the full story. They remind him he's already been charged and there's nothing left to do, so he might as well just come clean. And he does. Chris finally lays it all out, detailing how he killed Shannon, his unborn child, and his daughter Bella and Celeste. But here's the thing, in most cases like this, you eventually get to the why. There's usually some twisted reasoning that helps it make sense, no matter how awful. But with Chris Watts, the why never materializes, it's just senseless. Since then, his story has been turned into 2 movies. The first one is Chris Watts' Confessions of a Killer, drops on 26th of January 2020, and then Netflix released like a movie like or a documentary called American Murder, The Family Next Door on September 30th of 2020, giving people another chance to try and understand the mind of this monster. But even after all this, the why remains as much of a mystery as ever. And to me, what confuses me is how he literally met this mistress 6 weeks before the killings, meaning that he hadn't even developed enough time to even know her for him to even want to do such a thing to his family. What happened to divorce? What happened to talking things out? What happened to just leaving? If you really hated your wife and your kids that much, why not just abandon them and run away with your mistress? Why do you have to kill them? I don't know. Was he thinking of the stress of the separation and probably bills? I don't know, because in my head I'm like, you could literally run away to another country if you really did not want to see your kids and everyone again. Like literally 6 weeks. It took 6 weeks for you to get to know someone new. Really, I'm so disappointed. And the fact again that he literally confessed only when he thought he was not going to get the death penalty. So you can kill someone and not want to die too. Wow. I was kind of annoyed that like Shannon's mother didn't want him to have the death penalty. But at the end of the day, I kind of understand where she's coming from. Her daughter is already dead, her grandkids are already dead, and putting a death sentence on him is not going to bring them back. If it would, then she would. But she just doesn't want death on her hands, that she killed somebody and she would live with that guilt forever, no matter who or what the person has done. I don't know, if you guys were Shannon's mom, do you guys think that you would actually go ahead with it? I know I can't say, honestly, I can't say, but yeah, just let me know what you guys think, and if there's anything I missed out, you can let me know. If you guys want to also know about the mistress, I think she was lying in the beginning saying that she didn't know anything, but like, yeah, we definitely know that she knew that Chris was married. Yeah, you know, you're just like a little bitchy bitch. She might have not known that he wanted to kill her, but he was a married man. Okay, he was a married man, and you shouldn't have. But anywho, that's the end of this case, guys, and I'll be seeing you guys in my next video.